All right. Good morning, everyone. Exodus chapter 9. Exodus 9. Good to see all of you. Exodus 9. All of us in our sleepy state. Exodus 9. I think I told Isaac Exodus 8, didn't I? But it's Exodus 9. Exodus 9 is where we are at. We were not together last Sunday. Pastor Todd was here. I'm sure that you guys were blessed by him. Exodus chapter 9, we are going to see plagues 5, 6, and 7. Let's get some points up here. Maybe if this thing is working. Having a little bit. There it is. That looks like, that's Exodus 7. That's okay. We'll let them get that figured out. Exodus chapter 9, we are going to see plagues 5, 6, and 7. Now, if you're new this morning, just visiting, haven't been here for a while, let me tell you what's going on. We've been going through the book of Exodus. We're in the section on the 10 plagues. And obviously, this is where we're at this morning. We've covered the first 4. Now we're at 5, 6, and 7. And what we've seen each time, and we'll continue to see this, and we'll see this today, though some of the details, the specifics may be different. The general way that this has been going is that Moses and Aaron have been warning Pharaoh, hey, let God's people go. Pharaoh will not. So what's happening each time is that God is releasing a plague on Pharaoh, on the Egyptians. And so each time it's intensified because of Pharaoh's stubbornness. His own people, the Egyptians, have been suffering. And again, it intensifies. It's a little more each time. And so today, what we'll see is we will see animals dying in plague 5. We will see boils on plague 6. And then at plague 7, we will see hail. And we'll see how each of those applies to the Egyptians. Exodus chapter 9. Beginning at verse 1, we are in the section on plague number 5, where we see animals die. And the first thing that we see, as we've seen so often, is the cautioning of Pharaoh. They cautioned Pharaoh. Verse 1, then the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh and tell him, thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews. So again, it's clear they're just passing on a message. This is what God says. Thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may serve me. Now, you must understand that Pharaoh's mindset would have been, no, these are my people. I'm not going to let them go. And not that he considered these people to be Egyptians, but hey, these are my slaves, and I'm not letting them go. So God is demanding, let my people go that they may serve me. Verse 2, for if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will be on your cattle in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep, a very severe pestilence. So while Pharaoh is this heathen king, okay, this heathen ruler who does not want to honor God, I want you to take note. And this has been happening throughout the plagues and will continue to happen. And that is that God deals with Pharaoh as if Pharaoh was his own child. And I mean that in a good way. Those of you that are here this morning, you probably have some pretty good parents, I would imagine. And they probably at times have given you an ultimatum. Listen, put the toy down, or else I'm going to spank your bottom, whatever it was, as you were younger. Or maybe as you were older, listen, get to your homework now, turn off the TV, get to your homework, or else you're going to lose TV for, a month. Or you're going to, I'm going to take your phone away. That's a big one. If you don't do what I'm saying, I'm going to take your phone away. And so God is dealing with Pharaoh in a very gracious way, in a very merciful way. Now, he could very well have just come in. God could have demanded and just said, you do it now or else. And he could have started just wiping people out. But he didn't do that. He takes his time patiently, persistently, and he each time is giving Pharaoh this alternative. Look, like, hey, you can obey me, let the people go, or this is what's going to happen. If you refuse to let them go, verse 2, and still hold them, behold, what he says this time is, the hand of the Lord will be on your cattle, in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep, a very severe pestilence. Now, my daughter would just be absolutely heartbroken over this one because she loves animals. We've got 2 little dogs, and she loves those little dogs. They're okay, but to me, they're just dogs. And it's like, well, you know, they're dogs and they belong outside, but she gets them inside as often as she can. And sometimes I'll walk in the room and, you know, one of them's on the bed and it's like, hey, get off of there right now. And they jump up and they take off right away. With her, they've got freedom. With me, not so much. She would be absolutely heartbroken. And we look at this, we may look at this, and if we pull this out of context, we just say, well, why in the world would God want to harm their animals? Well, God did not want to harm their animals. However, 4 times now he has given Pharaoh an opportunity. Now comes the 5th time, and God is seeking to intensify each time. Now, in harming the animals, as there's this threat of animals dying, understand this. You go, well, it's just an animal, it's not a big deal. But understand that if they lose their cattle, their horses, their donkeys, their camels, their oxen, their sheep, they've got nothing. I mean, that is their food source. And they can't go and eat rotten animals or rotting animals. And so it would behoove them. That means it would be in their best interest for them and for Pharaoh, rather, to relent, to give up and say, no, here, take your people and go. Don't attack our animals. But let's see what happens. It says in verse 4, this is still God speaking through Moses and Aaron, and the Lord will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt. So nothing shall die of all that belongs to the children of Israel. So God, as he began these plagues, part of the way into it, he starts to make a difference between the 2 groups of people. You've got the Egyptians who are ruling, and then you've got the Israelites, or the children of Israel. This would have been Israel. Those of you that have been with us for a while, we studied through Genesis. This was old Israel, old Jacob. These are all his descendants here. And he's saying here, listen, I'm going to make a difference. So in other words, the animals of the Egyptians are going to be harmed. They're going to die. But the animals of the Israelites are not. I'm going to show you, Pharaoh, that my divine protection is around my people, even their animals. So, man, what how miraculous would that have been? For let's put it in just some some modern day application. It would be as if perhaps a storm, or in this case, you're in your neighborhood, all of, everybody else's animals died, everybody's pets died. Their birds, their cats, their dogs, whatever, their reptiles, whatever else they've got, but not yours, because God was divinely, he was miraculously protecting only yours. So God is telling him, listen, this is what's going to happen. And in verse 5, then the Lord appointed a set time, saying, tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land. So they cautioned Pharaoh, this is what's going to happen. Okay? Very, very gracious, very merciful, very patient. Verse 6, here's where we get into our second subpoint. If you're taking notes, so we're still in this plague number 5. We saw the cautioning of Pharaoh. Now we see that God carried out the judgment. If you're taking notes, carried out the judgment. So the Lord did this thing on the next day, just like he said that he would, just like he had warned Pharaoh, gave him a chance. Did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died. But of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died, not even one. The Egyptians had one of their many, many gods. Was the god of Hathor, who was thought to be a mother goddess and was in the form of a cow. Oftentimes the head, as they had their images made, whether it be a statue or an image on a wall, it was seen oftentimes with the head of a cow. Cattle were actually considered to be sacred and a symbol of fertility. And so as God is sending this plague on these animals, it would have been just extremely, what's the word I'm looking for, disrespectful to Pharaoh, to the Egyptians, that, hey, our cows, who we consider to be, and lots of our other animals, but our cows who are considered to be sacred are all dying. And so the Egyptians would not kill cows, and yet all of their cattle were dying. In verse 7, it goes on to say, then Pharaoh sent, and indeed not even one of the livestock of the Israelites was dead. So Pharaoh wants to find out, okay, what these two men said was going to happen actually happened, but I want to see if it was a complete work of God. And so he sends messengers out to the land of Goshen to find out about the animals that belong to the Israelites. They come back and they say, hey, everybody's animal in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites are, everyone's animals are still alive. Incredible. So God was in applying this plague and releasing this plague. As he's performing this miracle, he's thorough in what he does. God is always going to be thorough. He's always going to be thorough. Let's catch ourselves up here. Let's see if this is working. Okay, so they cautioned Pharaoh, and then God carried out the judgment, is right where we're at. Thank you guys very much. So Pharaoh's he finds out, hey, none of their animals died. So you would think, right, that at this point he would know that, okay, what God said again for the 5th time happened. Maybe I should release these people. But we find out in verse 7 in the second part, but the heart of Pharaoh became hard, and he did not let the people go. He reminds me of just a bratty little kid. And you get some kids together, and one's being a brat trying to boss everybody around, and maybe the other one's to say, you know what, you better quit being a brat and trying to boss me around, or I'm leaving. Okay, don't leave. I'll be better. And then the little kids start to play again, and then that little kid gets bossy again, gets bratty, and they say, okay, well then forget it. I'm going back to my house. No, don't leave, or I'll stop. Pharaoh continues to do this. Let's move into the next plague, which is plague number 6, which is boils. Boils. In verse 8, we find that there is no warning this time. He's done this before, but he does it again. No warning. Verse 8. So the Lord said to Moses and Aaron. Now remember, Pharaoh he said, he hardened his heart and would not allow the children of Israel to leave. So this time God sends a plague, evidently with no warning. So the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take for yourselves handfuls of ashes from a furnace, and let Moses scatter it toward the heavens in the sight of Pharaoh. And it will become fine dust in all the land of Egypt. And it will cause boils that break out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt. Then they took ashes from the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses scattered them toward heaven, and they caused boils that break out in sores on man and beast. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. A couple of weeks ago, we've been repainting the inside of our house, and I went out. We've got in the garage, we've got a sink. We call it a slop sink. You can go out there. It's a big, just a big sink, and you can dump stuff in there. You can dump all your paint illegally in it. Oh no, I didn't say that. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Just kidding. We don't dump our paint down there, but you can wash all your stuff off in there. And I was scraping off some of my brushes and rollers and different things. And then there was paint down there, and so I was kind of scraping it together to collect it. It's kind of already dried up, obviously, kind of like gluey, gummy. And as I'm scraping the bottom, all of a sudden I got a splinter, and I was like, oh man, what was that? And I looked and I tried to pull out what I could, but I didn't get it all. And so over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been dealing with that. And it's like I poked at it and, stuck a needle in there and was digging around in there and thought I got it all. Evidently, I didn't get it all, because then I started to grow like what I thought was a blister. Last night, I started to poke at it again because I was outside working, mowing the lawn, doing different things, and it's starting to hurt more and more. And it's like, man, I got to get this out. And it's a tiny little thing. I mean, I hold my hand up, you can't even see it. Probably people in the front row can't even see it. Maybe I'm just a sissy. But that tiny little thing has just been plaguing me, and it's getting worse. I cannot imagine what these Egyptians must have been experiencing. It is believed that these boils, these blisters that were growing all over their bodies, were actually oozing. Probably stunk. And they're experiencing all of this because their king, because their leader, Pharaoh, will not relent. He won't give up. But how interesting, verse 8, look at this. He tells them how to perform it. I love this. Now remember, Moses and Aaron are simply the mouthpieces. They're the messengers. They're not coming up with all of this stuff on their own. They're doing what God tells them to do, and God is directing them step by step. And he tells them in verse 8, take for yourselves handfuls of ashes. Now, I want you to think about that. Handful of ashes, what does that do to your hands? It's definitely going to make them ashy, right? It's going to make them dirty, right? They're going to be dark, they're going to be dirty. And they've got to take handfuls of ashes from a furnace, and then they've got to go to Pharaoh and spread them. It says, scatter it toward the heavens in the sight of Pharaoh. So I want you to picture that basketball player. I don't know what his name is, because who watches basketball anyways when they're soccer, right? Who would waste their time? Anyways, there's that basketball player who will take the powder or the chalk before the game. Who is it, Matt? LeBron. Oh, LeBron, of course, LeBron. And the guy, everybody knows LeBron, right? Yeah, me either. Anyways, they take the chalk and, poof, and it kind of just, goes up into the sky or whatever. And they were to do this with the ashes. They were to take these ashes and throw those things up into the sky. Now, again, I'm just thinking practical, and maybe it's just me, being simple-minded, but I'm thinking, now my hands are dirty. I've thrown these ashes up into the sky. Now the room's dirty, and I got to clean that up. And, now maybe the ashes got in my face or got in my hair or whatever, or they're all over my clothes or whatever. But that is what God is requiring. I want you to throw these up toward the sky in the presence of Pharaoh. And at that point, verse 9, it will become fine dust in all the land of Egypt. Now, incredible that God is telling them. I want you to notice this. This takes us back to when Moses first showed up in Egypt. Because remember that God said, he goes, hey, Moses says, I can't go, talk to Pharaoh. And he goes, hey, yes, you can. He goes, Moses says, he's never going to believe me. And God asks him, what do you have in your hand? And he says, well, I've got the staff. Okay, throw that on the ground. Most of us think of like, a Gandalf staff, or, it's just like magical, and it's got these, magical wizard powers or whatever. But it was just a stick. It was just a stick. But put into the hands of God, it became more than a stick. These are just ashes. They're just normal ashes. But when we take what we have, and you say, man, all I've got is a stick. At one point, Moses, God told him, okay, now stick your hand inside of your bosom, pull it out. And what God was teaching him was, look, if you've got a stick, I can use that. If you don't have a stick, you're empty-handed, I can use that also. And this time, it's ashes. I want you to take ashes. Ashes, really? Ashes are things that we scrape out of the fireplace and, we dump. We put them in the trash. Those are not something to be seen as, some precious commodity. But in the hands of God, what we have, the practical things, the things that we think are worth nothing, can be so precious in the hands of God. And it's a quick lesson because we've got to keep moving. We've got plagues to cover. But you may consider yourself to be nothing. You may consider yourself to be inadequate or insufficient. Or that, I've got no special abilities. There's, I can't play an instrument, and I don't sing, and I'm not the greatest student, and, my hair is funny, or whatever, all the different thoughts that you might have. And you might consider your worth to be very, very small. And maybe, perhaps, in the eyes of the world, your worth is very small. But if you would take what you have, and you say, well, I don't have nothing. Well, then take that and place that in the hands of God and watch what He can do with ashes, with a stick, with just your hands. I don't know what your relationship is like with your parents. I don't know how much attention they give you. Maybe you're looking for more attention and they won't give it. I don't know if they will. But I know that God is interested in you. I know that God is interested in using you. Even when you feel like, man, I've got nothing to offer. Neither do I. Join the club. Just what you have, and even if you're thinking, I ain't got nothing, well then lay that in the hands of God and watch what He can do. He takes ashes. And what it says in verse 9, at that point, they're normal ashes, but as Moses, by faith, throws them up into the air, it will become fine dust in all the land of Egypt. God is going to change those ashes into this fine dust that will cause boils that break out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt. So they did just that in verse 10. They took ashes from the furnace and stood before Pharaoh. Moses scattered them toward heaven, and they caused boils that break out in sores on man and beast. Now we see in verse 11 where there was no warning. Now we see no standing. Verse 11, and the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. For the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians. And I think it's safe to assume that even their legs, their feet, their entire bodies were covered with these boils. So that they were not able to stand. Literally, practically, they were not able to come and stand in the court of Pharaoh before Moses and Aaron. But also, I think what it's indicating for us is that God is separating Himself from the power of these so-called magicians. Remember, we looked at that several weeks back, that these magicians, we found out, were actually directly related, the word magicians, and these people were directly related to the occult. And I believe that the things that they did, because they were able to duplicate the miracle when Moses threw his staff on the ground and it turned into a snake, these magicians showed up and said, that's nothing. And they threw their staffs down and theirs turned into snakes also. I believe that they were influenced and led and directed by the power of Satan. But now at this point, God is setting Himself apart, so that not even these magicians, these so-called magicians or religious individuals, these people who in Egypt were considered to be powerful, now they cannot even stand in the same place with Moses and Aaron. What a scene! That Moses and Aaron are there and just, where's everybody at? And no one can stand before them. We saw no warning, no standing, and we see in verse 12, this is crazy, no change. Verse 12, but the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses. Now, in case you haven't been here, let me explain something to you real quickly about verse 12. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. There are two different thoughts about that. One is that it's exactly what it says there, that God hardened Pharaoh's heart and Pharaoh didn't have a choice. And some people are okay with that. They say, hey, it's the sovereignty of God, and He chose some people to be saved and others He did not. And so He just chose Pharaoh to experience this and to suffer this. I believe this. I believe that as it says, the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, I think that's absolutely true. However, I do not think that it was against the will of Pharaoh. I think that Pharaoh was hardening his own heart. And each time he came into contact with God, it got harder and harder. So yes, in a sense, God was hardening his heart, but it was not against the will of Pharaoh. Now, if you believe the other way, that's okay. I still like you. Can you still like me? Okay? Nevertheless, Pharaoh's heart is hardened here. And it says in the second part of verse 12, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses. I mean, man, Pharaoh, what's it going to take? You know, I was ready to give up with this little tiny, blister callus splinter that I've got in my finger. Yesterday, it was just like, I'm trying to water and do different things. Like, it's bothering me. What's it going to take, Pharaoh? I mean, you see all of your people suffering. I mean, this is the height of selfishness here. Everybody's suffering because of me, but I'm not going to change. I'm not going to stop. I am not going to give up. I'm not going to give in. And we may admire his determination, but in this case, this is foolishness. This is stupidity. It's time to give in. Time to throw in the towel. Give up. Your people are suffering because of your selfishness. Isis, who among many other things was a healer and goddess of medicine, or, if I can pronounce this right, Imhotep, who was said to be the god of medicine. As God is sending this plague, it would have been an assault on perhaps one or maybe even both of those gods, those Egyptian gods. And so God again is setting himself apart. Let's move on to plague number 7. Plague number 7. Sorry, no warning, no standing, no change. Plague number 7, verse 13. Again, Pharaoh is cautioned. They cautioned Pharaoh. Then the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For at this time I will send all my plagues to your very heart, and on your servants, and on your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. I mean, real quickly, let me just remind some of you, those of you that were here, if you weren't, when Moses first showed up and said, hey, the Lord says, let my people go, Pharaoh asked a question. Pharaoh asked this question. Pharaoh asked, who is the Lord? Well, God, ever since then, has been revealing who he is to Pharaoh. Now, let me ask you a question real quick. I'll give you a second to wake up. It's like, whoa, he's asking a question. You there? Okay. Do you think that God owed Pharaoh an explanation? Did God owe Pharaoh an explanation? Anybody? Did God? Here, let me ask it one more time. Did God owe Pharaoh an explanation of what he was doing? No, right? Absolutely not. He did not owe him anything. God could have done whatever he wanted to. However, what God is doing is he's answering Pharaoh's question. Who is the Lord? Who is the Lord? Well, I'll show you. I'll show you who I am. And what he's doing is he's revealing through each of these plagues, listen, I'm the God over every god. Whatever false gods you have, Pharaoh, they bow to me. And it's not that they're real gods, but they cannot measure up. And he's revealing that to Pharaoh at each step. Verse 14, for at this time, God says, I will send all my plagues to your very heart, and on your servants and on your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. Verse 15, now if I had stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. And you're thinking, well, he did strike them with pestilence. What he's saying is, had I decided to at the very beginning just sent in something that killed everybody, you would have just been wiped out. Again, there are critics, there are skeptics of the Bible who say, they read this story and they go, well, look how mean God was. And I'm saying this story shows just the opposite. It shows us how patient God is, how gracious he is. And he's telling him, look, I could have just wiped you out. I want you to think about something. We're on the 7th plague now. God never once told Pharaoh, I'm going to take your kingdom from you. What God is saying to him is, let my people go. Evidently, God was willing to let Pharaoh keep his kingdom. You can have it, and your pyramids and your whatever else you have. Let my people go. Incredible. That God was willing, hey, you keep everything else, but I want my people. And so he never once threatens to take the kingdom from him. He tells him, he reminds him, listen, if I had decided to, I could have wiped you out, verse 15. Verse 16, but indeed for this purpose I have raised you up, he is saying to Pharaoh, that I may show my power in you. So God has a specific purpose for Pharaoh. I'm going to show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. It's funny, there's no mention there of Moses and Aaron. Let me look at it again, verse 16. But indeed for this purpose I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. It's funny, God didn't even take time to mention Moses and Aaron. What about them? Don't they get something out of the deal? I mean, they're the mouthpieces. Moses could have been home, with his father's flock out in the desert, and here he had to drop all that and go to Egypt. But God evidently is not so concerned about Moses and Aaron getting any glory. God only mentions himself because God can. Why not? Why should Moses and Aaron get any glory? God is the one that's working the miracles. God is the one that's doing all of the work. He sends Moses and Aaron, sure, but he's simply working through those two men. So God he's got a purpose. He wants to reveal himself to and through Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And in verse 16, and he says, I want my name to be declared in all the earth. Listen, God in verse 16 just revealed what he wants. His desire. His desire is for all of the earth, meaning all of the people on planet Earth. He didn't mention Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and, some far off, planet where we think there might be life forms. He says in verse 16, I want my name to be declared in all the earth. I want everybody, every human being on the face of planet Earth to know who I am, God says. That ought to be my goal also, to make God known, to make God famous, not myself. Because, man, I can get caught up and find myself trying to chase down, new followers and man, how many followers do I have? Oh, the numbers, I got to get those numbers up, and I got to, like for like, and it's all about how many people can I get to, follow my feed. And that's okay. Get a bunch of people following your feed, fantastic. But if that's my goal in life, I'm falling short. I'm cheating myself. And I ought to be making the glory of God, his fame, my chief endeavor. In other words, my chief goal, my chief aim. I ought to be seeking to make him known, to make him famous. You see, that's what he's saying here in verse 16. He says that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. That is the ultimate goal. To gain status financially, socially, whatever status you may attain to, fine, fantastic, whatever. But have you glorified God? Have we promoted God? That's the goal. And if I can spend or invest my life in that, well, then it's been a worthy endeavor. Then I've spent or I've invested my life well. You see, when I get to heaven, I won't take all of my IG followers with me. Some of them may go, but not because of me. I can't take my vehicles with me or my freshly painted house. or my little Volkswagen. I won't be taking those with me. I won't need them there. I won't care. And so I ought not to spend my life making those things my chief goal, my chief aim. But I ought to spend my life, invest my life in making God known. If I can do that, then I have spent my life well. Verse 18 says, behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to rain down, such as has not been in Egypt since its founding until now. Therefore send now and gather your livestock. Look at this. Verse 19 is giving him a chance. Therefore send now and gather your livestock and all that you have in the field. For the hail shall come down on every man and every animal which is found in the field and is not brought home, and they shall die. That's some serious hail, right? Weather Channel's never seen anything like that. That's some serious hail. Everybody better get inside, bring in your pets, bring in your work animals, because once this hail starts falling, this is going to be so big, it's going to be so harsh that it's going to kill man and beast. He gives them a warning. He gives them a chance. Now check this out. He just told them, do this. Gather all of the animals and the people inside. So what is he doing in verse 19? He is actually inviting the Egyptians to believe him. He's actually giving them an opportunity to exercise their faith in him. Okay, God said it. I imagine that the Egyptians, and we're going to see here that some of them indeed did do this, that some of them saw, wait a minute, there's been 6 plagues leading up to this. Each time this man Moses showed up and he said this is what God's going to do, every single time it happened, and it happened exactly the way he said it was going to happen. Now I hear that this hail is going to be falling, and I'm getting this warning that I need to head for for shelter. Now they have a choice. I can stand with Pharaoh, or I can believe God. And we'll see both. Now in verse 20, what we see is they called forth the hail. Verse 20. He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh, watch out, made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. So there were some that were serving for and with Pharaoh that actually believed the message this time, and they went out and they got their servants, their workers, and their animals and brought them all inside, indoors, under cover, so that they would be saved from the hail. Look at God. Look at God. Look what he does. He gives those sinful, pagan Egyptians an opportunity to trust him, to believe him. Father Abraham had many sons. Remember that song? How many of you remember that song? Yes. God bless you guys, all the children's ministry people. Yes. Right? Fun song. I wasn't in Sunday school when I was little, but I remember the song, when I was older and I was serving, and it's like you just jump up there with the kids and do the dance. I love it. But why am I bringing him up? Because Abraham, as far as we can tell, you go back to Genesis chapter 11, chapter 12, as far as we can tell, Abraham was a straight up idolater. And we go, no, that's not, he's the father of the Hebrews, he's the first Hebrew, and, he was chosen by God. Yes, God had mercy on that man's soul. His entire family was wrapped up in idolatry. So there's no reason to believe that Abraham was not also, and yet God spoke to him and gave him an opportunity and invited him on an adventure into the life of faith. And God is doing the same thing here. He says, hey, here's a warning, and I'm giving you Egyptians, with all of your false gods and your idols and all of the worship that goes. I mean, they were worshiping, cattle. They were worshiping the sun. They were worshiping everything. And yet God extends his hand of mercy to them. So it's a good lesson for you and I, that there are some extremely sinful people outside of these walls. And there are some extremely sinful people at our schools or in society or at the mall. And oftentimes what we can find ourselves doing is being repelled by them and rejecting them. Because, oh, you're so sinful, or, you believe this, or you do this thing, or you wear that shirt, or, you go to this kind of party, or, you believe in this thing. And oftentimes we can find ourselves repelled by them and rejecting them straight out. And yet we see a good lesson here, a good reminder that it is to those people that God extends his hand of mercy. And so we have the opportunity to do the same, to extend God's hand of mercy. He does it here. Incredible. So some believe in verse 20. However, in verse 21, but he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in the land of Egypt, in all the land of Egypt, on man, on beast, and on every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven. There it is. There's the rod. That's just a fancy name for stick. Okay? And so, verse 23, and Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire darted to the ground. What? And the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So it was so much more than just the hail. Did you get all of that in verse 23? Thunder, not a big deal. I like thunder. Hail, it's fun here because we don't get like those golf size or softball size hail that they get in Tejas in Texas, right? Fire, so there's thunder, there's hail, there's fire. What? How can you have fire just falling out of the sky, and there's thunder and there's hail also? How are you going to have hail and fire at the same time? What is going on? Again, this is the judgment of God. It's intensifying. When we go, well, that's not possible. What is possible with God? Verse 24, so there was hail, and fire mingled with the hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail struck throughout throughout the whole land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. Again, it's miraculous. Nut. You go, yeah, Pastor Chris, you're a nut. No, Nut, the goddess of the sky, the stars, cosmos, the goddess of mothers, astronomy, and the universe. God is, as he sends this plague, this hail, it would have been, again, an assault on their belief in the goddess Nut, N-U-T, who was believed to control all of these things. God says, I'm bigger. I'm going to do this tomorrow. This is what's going to happen. Now, let's move on to our last section here, where they called off the plague. Verse 27, and Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron, and said to them, look at what Pharaoh says, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and my people are wicked. Entreat the Lord, that there may be no more mighty thundering and hail, for it is enough. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. So Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I will spread out my hands to the Lord, the thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. Did you catch that? This is the lesson. You must understand that the earth is the Lord's. It's not nuts. It's not ISIS. It doesn't belong to any of your false gods. It belongs to the one true God. Verse 30, but as for you and your servants, I know that you will not yet fear the Lord God. Now the flax and the barley were struck, for the barley was in the head and the flax was in bud. But the wheat and spelt were not struck, for they are late crops. So in other words, God wiped out all of their crops except for the wheat and the spelt, because those weren't blooming yet. Verse 33, so Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to the Lord. Then the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured on the earth. I commend Moses. Because I think I would have caught myself, and this is why I don't, God never sent me to do something like this. I think I would have veered from God's plan a little bit and been like, no, because just a moment ago, he said, look, I know that you're not going to give in, but I'm going to talk to the Lord anyways. I would have been like, you know what, I know you're not going to give in, so I'm not letting up yet. And what you can do, Pharaoh, is you can pack up your things into your chariot and you can hightail it out of here. And when I can't see you any longer, then I'll tell God to stop the hail. But Moses follows directions. Okay? He follows directions. He goes out, and we're told in verse 33 that Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to the Lord. Then the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured on the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet more, and he hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hard, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. Determination. We see that as a good quality. But oftentimes our determination, our stubbornness, may lead us in the wrong direction. And if you find yourself this morning, maybe you're right in the middle of it, man. You're mixed up with mom or with dad. Maybe you've been getting into it like, hey, I want to do this thing. I'm trying to go, why can't I go hang out with him? Why can't I go hang out with her? Why can't you just let me do what I want to do? My friends get to do what they want to do. Why don't you just let me do what I want to do? And maybe your parents are taking their stand like, no, we're not budging on this. We don't want you to go spend time with that fool. He is going to lead you astray. And maybe you're feeling like, no, you just got to be determined. You just got to stick with it. There are times when it is good to be determined. And then there are times when it is foolish to be determined. When you are determined to head down the wrong road and end up in the wrong place, that is foolishness. And God is giving Pharaoh opportunity of 7 plagues. At least 7 times, God has given Pharaoh an opportunity to stop. And so do you think that if God gave Pharaoh that many opportunities, and we're going to get to plague number 10, not today, but we'll get to plague number 10. If you think that God is giving him an opportunity, do you think that God will not give you an opportunity? This morning, as you sit here from the quietness of your own heart, and you think to yourself, you know what, you're right, you hit it, you hit the nail right on the head. I am kind of in the struggle with my parents, and, I want to go, hook up with this guy, or I want to hook up with this girl, and they won't let me, and, we're getting, we're getting into a fight. Stop. It really is as simple as making a decision. Now, it may hurt, there may be some emotions all wrapped up in it, but it really is just a decision. It's a decision where you just say, no, you know what, I'm going to trust God that not only him, but that he's leading my parents, that my parents know better, and I'm going to stop. I'm just going to knock it off. Or maybe you're wanting to do whatever it might be, and maybe you're putting up, maybe it's with a teacher. I know the school is just starting back up, and maybe it's with a teacher, and you're just not, you're not willing to bend your knee to that teacher. Because, they're whatever you might think about them. Well, they're godless. They don't believe in God anyways. And I'm, a child of God. And, so I'm going to do what I want. Whatever might be going through your mind, there are times when it's good to be determined. And there are times when you got to knock it off. You got to stop. And if that's you today, make that decision. Hey, God, thank you for your mercy. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for being patient with me. I need to stop. Help me to stop. Forgive me. Give me strength to stop, and give me strength to stop tomorrow and the day after that. I don't want to live that kind of life like Pharaoh, being a knucklehead, being hard-headed. God is merciful and loves you. He loves you passionately. Passionately. Let him love you. Father, thank you